The Confederation of Sentient Worlds had a very specific way of doing things. And by specific, I mean mind-numbingly bureaucratic, soul-crushingly inefficient, and monumentally condescending. Especially when it came to humans. I should know. I'm Jack Reyes, diplomatic attaché to the Terran Interstellar Delegation, which was about as prestigious a title as professional doormat in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Our office was located on the backside of the massive Concordance Station, a sprawling diplomatic hub that looked like someone had taken every sci-fi movie set design and vomited them into a single, ungainly structure. The station's central chamber was a marvel of architectural pretension. Holographic displays flickered with endless streams of diplomatic communiques, while representatives from over 200 different species meandered about, their various appendages, tentacles, and miscellaneous biological protrusions creating a traffic pattern that would give any urban planner an aneurysm. Humans, as always, were relegated to the metaphorical kids' table of galactic diplomacy. We'd only been on the interstellar scene for just over a century, which in galactic terms made us essentially toddlers. The Quarian Collective, a species of silicon-based life forms that looked like walking crystal chandeliers, had been part of the Confederation for over 6,000 years. They never missed an opportunity to remind us of our junior status. Jack Reyes, drawled Crystallis Prime, the senior Quarian diplomat, his prismatic body catching the artificial light in ways that suggested he was deliberately trying to look more impressive than everyone else. Another day of learning, I presume? Learning. That was diplomatic speak for sit down, shut up, and maybe we'll acknowledge your existence if you're very quiet. The problem wasn't just that humans were new. We were different. While most established galactic civilizations had reached a kind of stagnant equilibrium, developing technology at a glacial pace and treating innovation like a communicable disease, humanity kept doing something truly terrifying. We adapted. We improvised. We broke rules. Take faster than light travel, for example. The established races had spent millennia developing complex interstellar jump networks with precisely calculated quantum tunneling protocols. Humans? Nah. We looked at those protocols, laughed, and basically MacGyvered a solution that was 30% more efficient and cost a fraction of the price. The Confederation's response? Endless committees, regulatory hearings, investigations, anything to slow down our progress. I'd spent the last 5 years watching this dance. Humans would propose something innovative, and the galactic bureaucracy would respond with a wall of paperwork so dense it could deflect small meteorites. Our proposals for more efficient energy generation, streamlined communication networks, adaptive terraforming techniques all met with the same glacial resistance. My current assignment was supposedly about negotiating expanded trade routes for human colonies. In reality, it was another exercise in diplomatic performative art. Talk a lot. Say nothing. Drink questionable alien beverages that may or may not be poisonous to human biochemistry. The meeting scheduled for today was typical. The Basmorian trade delegation, beings that looked like a cross between octopi and filing cabinets, was supposed to review our proposal for establishing a new trade corridor through the Epsilon Quadrant. I'd prepared exhaustive documentation, run multiple economic simulations, and even learned enough of their complex click-whistle language to make my presentation. I knew exactly how this would go. They would nitpick. They would delay. They would find some obscure regulation from the third appendix of a treaty signed 17 galactic standards centuries ago that would somehow invalidate our entire proposal. And yet, here I was. Again. My communication tablet chirped. A message from Elena Rodriguez, our delegation's tech specialist, flashed with a level of encrypted urgency that immediately caught my attention. Something was brewing. Something beyond the standard diplomatic nonsense. Little did I know that this day, this seemingly ordinary diplomatic clusterfrag, would be the moment everything changed. The moment humanity would stop playing by the galaxy's rules and start writing our own. The moment we'd make them remember why they should never underestimate a species that invented both duct tape and the internet. The Basmorian delegation arrived precisely 3 minutes late, which, in their culture, was considered a power move. Ambassador Krell Tick slithered into the conference room, his tentacled body undulating with an air of supreme bureaucratic arrogance that could make a DMV employee look spontaneous by comparison. Attaché, he clicked and whistled, the translation matrix in my ear converting his complex language into something resembling human speech. But we have reviewed your trade corridor proposal. I knew that tone. It was the vocal equivalent of a rubber stamp preparing to crush dreams. The conference room was a marvel of galactic diplomatic design, which is to say, it was simultaneously over-engineered and monumentally uncomfortable. Chairs that seemed designed by committee to accommodate at least 17 different physiological configurations, meaning they were perfectly uncomfortable for any single species. Krell-Tik's primary negotiation team flanked him. There was Sar Nix, their legal expert, who looked like a cross between a filing cabinet and a particularly judgmental praying mantis. To the right, Mole Pack, their economic strategist, whose translucent membrane seemed to pulse with bureaucratic condescension. After extensive review, Krell-Tik continued, we find multiple inconsistencies. I'd heard this before. Inconsistencies in Basmorian diplomatic speak typically meant we found a way to obstruct your proposal using regulations older than most civilizations. Sar Nix extended a razor-thin appendage, projecting a holographic document that would make the most complex tax form look like light reading. Subsection 7.3. Paragraph Epsilon of the Interstellar Commerce Accord of Galactic Cycle 42187 clearly stipulates that any proposed trade route crossing more than 3 stellar administrative zones requires a comprehensive biocompatibility assessment. I knew exactly what was coming. The biocompatibility assessment was a nightmare process so Byzantine it could take decades to complete, which was precisely the point. We will require, Molepack added, their membrane rippling with what could only be described as bureaucratic glee, a full genetic mapping of every potential crew member, psychological profiles, economic impact studies, environmental compatibility reports. The unspoken message was clear: go away. We don't want you here. This was the standard playbook. Humanity was the new kid, the upstart civilization that hadn't paid its bureaucratic dues. We were expected to wait our turn, to be grateful for even being allowed to submit proposals, to navigate a system deliberately designed to prevent meaningful progress. I'd prepared for this. My tablet was loaded with counter-arguments, cross-reference data, legal precedents. But I could see it was futile. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to demonstrate power. I see, I said, my voice carefully modulated. Years of diplomatic training meant I could sound completely neutral while internally preparing to throw something. Just then, my communication implant buzzed. A message from Elena Rodriguez, encrypted and urgent. The timing was suspiciously perfect. Krell-Tik continued his elaborate dismissal. The Confederation requires a more mature approach to interstellar commerce. Perhaps in another generation, your species might understand the nuanced protocols. I stopped listening. The message from Elena was burning a hole in my attention. It wasn't just a message. It was a data package, encrypted, but partially visible. Something about system vulnerabilities. Something about the Basmorian communication network. Something that suggested our marginalization wasn't just bureaucratic, it was systematic. The Basmorians were still talking. Sar Nix was now detailing some obscure regulation about quantum entanglement in trade corridors that would make a law library seem exciting by comparison. Molepack had started a holographic presentation that looked like a cross between a technical manual and an avant-garde art installation. But my mind was elsewhere. Elena's message was a breadcrumb, a hint. A suggestion that maybe, just maybe, humanity had ways of fighting back that didn't involve filling out forms. As the Basmorians droned on, I began to see the outline of a plan. Not a diplomatic plan. Not a legal plan. A different kind of plan entirely. We appreciate the Confederation's thorough review, I said, my voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. We will, of course, submit the required documentation. Krell-Tik's tentacles rippled in what passed for a smile among his species. Another human proposal successfully buried in red tape. If only they knew what was coming. My safe house wasn't exactly a high-tech marvel. It was a converted shipping container on the edge of the human quarter of Concordance Station, retrofitted with enough signal jammers and encryption tech to make a cybersecurity expert weep with joy. Elena Rodriguez was already there when I arrived, her fingers dancing across multiple holographic displays like a concert pianist performing a particularly aggressive symphony. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Took you long enough," she muttered, pulling up a dizzying array of intercepted communications and network diagrams. "I've been digging through Basmorian communication protocols for the last 36 hours. You know how many layers of encryption these bureaucratic octopi use?" I knew better than to interrupt her flow. Elena wasn't just a tech specialist. She was a digital alchemist who could turn complex communication networks into her personal playground. "We need a team," I said, more to myself than to her. She snorted. "Obviously. But not just any team. We need people who are crazy enough to think we can actually pull this off and smart enough to make it happen." First on my list was Marcus Klein, former psychological warfare specialist from the UN Diplomatic Corps, current freelance negotiation consultant. Translation: a man who could talk his way out of, or into virtually anything. I found him in a zero-gravity bar 3 levels down, playing 3-dimensional chess with a Trilaxian trader. The Trilaxian looked confused. Marcus looked bored. "I need you," I said, sliding into the seat next to him. Marcus didn't even look up from the chess game. "Need me for what exactly?" "To help dismantle the most complex bureaucratic system in the known galaxy." He moved a chess piece, causing the Trilaxian to make a sound that was part gasp, part electric gargle. "Sold." Our third recruit was Dr. Imani Oke, a quantum systems engineer who had been quietly developing technologies that made the Confederation's best scientists look like they were working with abacuses. Her current research project, which had been systematically defunded and marginalized, involved adaptive communication networks that could literally reshape themselves in real time. I found her in her lab, surrounded by holographic models that looked like mathematical poetry given physical form. "They're going to hate this," she said by way of greeting, not even turning around. "Everything I've designed goes against every established communication protocol in the galaxy." "That's why we want you," I responded. The final member of our team was the wild card, Raj Mehta, a former corporate logistics specialist who had been blacklisted from every major interstellar shipping company for being too innovative, which in corporate speak meant he could optimize a supply chain so efficiently it made established systems look like they were run by drunk squirrels. "You want me to help take down the Confederation's trade regulations?" he asked, a dangerous glint in his eye. "After they've spent the last decade trying to crush every innovative idea humans have proposed?" "I want you to reimagine how interstellar commerce could work," I corrected. We met back at the shipping container safe house. 4 humans. 0 conventional methods. 1 absolutely insane plan. Elena had the network maps. Marcus had the psychological warfare strategies. Imani had the communication technology. Raja had the logistical framework. And I had the diplomatic cover and the burning desire to show the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. "So," Marcus said, pulling up a holographic display, "how exactly are we going to make the most powerful bureaucratic system in the galaxy look like a bunch of incompetent jellyfish?" Imani's quantum communication models began to dance across the screens. Raj was already running preliminary logistics simulations. Elena was breaking through encryption layers like they were made of tissue paper. "We're going to use their own system against them," I said. "Every regulation. Every protocol. We're going to find the weaknesses and turn them into weapons." The room hummed with a dangerous energy. This wasn't just a plan. This was a revolution human style. Bureaucratic warfare was about to get very, very interesting. The beauty of our plan was its absolute ridiculousness. We were going to use the Confederation's own bureaucratic nightmare against itself. Imani's quantum communication network was the first domino. She had developed a protocol that could simultaneously exist in multiple communication states, essentially creating a digital version of quantum entanglement. that would make the Confederation's communication infrastructure look like 2 tin cans and a piece of string. "They'll never see this coming," she muttered, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "I'm basically creating communication loopholes that violate every single established interstellar communication regulation." Elena was busy injecting our custom protocols into the Basmorian network. Not hacking, that would be too crude. She was weaving our code through their systems like a digital ninja, creating pathways that looked completely legitimate according to their own mind-numbingly complex regulations. Raj's logistics optimization was the real weapon. He had discovered that the Confederation's trade regulations were so convoluted that a sufficiently complex algorithm could create legitimate trade routes that would technically comply with every single regulation while simultaneously rendering those same regulations completely meaningless. "Watch this," Raj said, pulling up a holographic model that looked like a drunk spider had designed a transit map after consuming several gallons of alien moonshine. "Every single one of these routes is 100% legal. Completely, absolutely, bureaucratically legal." Marcus was our psychological warfare specialist. While the rest of us were working on the technical side, he was preparing the narrative. The way he would tell the story would be more damaging than any technological attack. The first signs of our plan's success came during the next Confederation trade review. The Basmorian delegation was presenting their standard obstructionist report when their communication systems began to wake up. At first, it was subtle. A few misrouted messages, some slightly garbled transmissions. Then things got interesting. Trade proposals that had been buried for decades suddenly popped up as fully approved. Entire sections of regulations began to contradict themselves in ways that would make a logic professor weep. The Confederation's communication network started to look like it had been designed by a committee of drunk squirrels. "Is this legal?" a Quarian representative asked, staring at a holographic display that now showed human trade proposals not just approved, but retroactively prioritized. Marcus leaned in. "Completely," he said with a smile that could freeze helium. "Every single action complies with existing regulations, exactly as written." The panic was beautiful. Watching bureaucrats try to untangle a system they had spent millennia creating was like watching someone try to solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a unicycle during an earthquake. Krell Tick, the Basmorian ambassador, was the first to realize the full extent of what was happening. His tentacles began to twist in what I could only describe as bureaucratic terror. "This is impossible," he stammered, watching his human trade proposals, research grants, and diplomatic initiatives began to cascade through the system like a digital avalanche. Imani's quantum communication network meant that every time they tried to block or reverse our actions, the system would essentially remember multiple potential states simultaneously. It was like trying to nail Jell-O to a quantum probability tree. "We're not breaking any rules," I said during an emergency Confederation hearing. "We're simply applying your existing regulations with optimal efficiency." The looks on their faces were better than any victory speech. We had turned their own system into a weapon, and they knew it. By the end of the week, human proposals that had been buried for decades were not just approved, they were fast-tracked. Research grants materialized. Trade routes opened. And the best part? Every single action was completely, 100% legal according to the Confederation's own incomprehensible regulations. Humanity hadn't just been given a seat at the table. We had redesigned the entire dining room. 6 months later, the galaxy looked different. Not because of massive structural changes, but because humanity had essentially rewired how everyone thought about progress. The Confederation's next diplomatic summit was a study in cosmic irony. Where once humans had been relegated to the sidelines, we were now at the center of every major discussion. Not through force, not through aggression, but through sheer, unapologetic innovation. "We're not here to take over," I found myself explaining again to a group of increasingly bewildered alien representatives. "We're here to help you realize your own potential." Krell Tick, the Basmorian ambassador who had once been the epitome of bureaucratic condescension, now looked like a deflated party balloon. His tentacles would twitch nervously whenever a human entered the room. Our team had become something of a legend. Elena Rodriguez was now consulting on communication network design. Dr. Imani Okeke was redesigning quantum communication protocols for half the known galaxies. Raj Mehta had essentially rewritten most of the Confederation's trade regulations. And Marcus? Marcus was having the time of his life, running diplomatic training sessions that were equal parts psychological warfare and stand-up comedy. The truly beautiful part was how we'd done it. No weapons, no invasion. Just a combination of creativity, determination, and an absolutely ruthless approach to reading the fine print. Humanity, one Trilaxian diplomat remarked, is like a combination of a quantum computer, a legal team, and a particularly stubborn toddler. I took that as a compliment. Our final act was perhaps our most elegant. We didn't just solve problems. We showed other civilizations how to solve their own. The Confederation was transforming from the inside out, and most species didn't even realize it was happening. As I looked out over the Concordance Station, the same place where we'd been marginalized just months ago, I couldn't help but smile. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. And honestly, they were going to love it.